Good morning, Dana. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, come on, everything that you touch with a podcast just grows into conversations outside of the podcast world. And here you go again with another one.
That's what I'm hoping for. The thing I love about this podcast, which is called Very Special Episodes, is that every single episode will make you say, this should be a movie. It's
Right.
the perfect podcast where if you're at a boring dinner party and you run out of things to say, you can just turn to the, tax accountant next to you and say, I just heard the craziest story on this podcast. And you'll have plenty to talk about for the next hour and a half.
Yeah, because, doesn't research show that all you need to do to get a conversation started is just know a little bit about it, because everybody else then brings their side of the story in?
Oh, I haven't heard that. I love that. That's totally right.
And this right here is such a conversation starter. It's one of those where you go, you're not going to believe what I heard while I was on my way over here today. A young Mark Twain and a bar fight. What? It sounds like a bad joke about ready to be shared.
Yeah. I know. An author walks into a bar, but it's truly a fascinating story. Basically, Mark Twain was in this bar fight. I don't want to give away the story, but he was forced to flee, winds up in gold country, and here's the story that will ultimately change his life and the course of American literature. It's a story stranger than anything out of a Mark Twain book. It's just absolutely fascinating. And on the way, we have episodes on the way.
Anything with Mark Twain is an interesting story because, the man was just so open with his writing. And plus, a lot of people don't realize that he was one of the first ones to have a machine take down his words instead of a secretary. And the secretary had to take his words and then put them in books. See, he wasn't physically sitting there because these ideas were just going through his head at all times.
He would have been the first podcaster.
Wouldn't that be? Oh, that's so true. That is so true. He seems to be that type of person.
He did. He collected stories and put them in fiction. And we're just trying to do that justice by collecting stories and putting them in podcast episodes.
Where did the idea come from to be able to do this? Because, this isn't just you alone working on this. You've got yourself a team now.
That's true. So I am the host of this podcast called Noble Blood, which tells stories, like little known stories about royals from history. And I've worked with Jason English, who's this incredible producer at iHeartRadio. And I think he probably knew that from my work on Noble Blood that I love weird, unusual stories from history. And so he brought me into this incredible team. It's Jason English. And my amazing co-host, Zaron. And each week we dive into super well-researched stranger than fiction stories. So it is absolutely a team effort. And each story has required so much research and energy to make sure we get it exactly right. Like the first episode where we tell the story of how on the last day of filming in Nova Scotia, the film Titanic, the big James Cameron blockbuster, someone laced the chowder that they had for lunch that day with PCP.
What? Oh, my God.
We still don't know who did it, but the entire cast and crew, it was basically a mass poisoning event. They had no idea what was happening as sort of members of the crew suddenly stopped being able to work. Eventually, they all had to go to the hospital to try to figure out what was happening. It's crazier than almost anything that happens in that movie.
See, now you make me want to see a documentary on something like this.
Yeah. Instead, I can just offer you an episode of a podcast.
When you do the podcast, do you envision us on this side? Because your subjects really are about things that really get our attention and take us to areas like a book does.
I just love being able to tell stories. I think it might be because being a writer is so isolating. I spend months just behind a desk working on a book, that when I hear a story that makes me want to go into the next room and interrupt my husband and say, you'll never believe what I just heard, or text a friend, I found out the craziest thing. Those are the stories I love, the ones that make me want to connect with people. And that's kind of the amazing thing about this podcast. Again, it's very special episodes. And I think secretly what's so special about it is even though you'll listen to them alone, they'll make you want to talk to everyone you encounter on the street just to tell them these stories.
What it does is it inspires me to do show prep before I go out into the community, because I don't want to go out there and be just a bump on a log. I want to be able to be prepared for, people are getting ready for the Super Bowl. They're getting whatever they can as an armchair quarterback. The same is true when it comes to just having general information about a conversation so you can fit in.
Absolutely. I mean, the art of conversation, some people are just like naturally gifted at it. I think it's a reflection of my personality that I do best when I'm reading scripts behind a microphone. But what I love about this podcast is it just makes you ready for anything, whatever type of person you interact with, whether they're a movie buff, so you can tell them the Titanic story, a literature buff, and you have a Mark Twain story in your pocket, whether they love moon rocks. We have a story coming up about
NASA.
The secret underground world of NASA's secret agents and the international moon rock trade.
Which freaks me out because I'm such a big NASA fan. I never even thought about that, being an underground world with the moon rocks, because what value do they really have to the normal person?
I know, that's the crazy thing, though, except people really want them. I guess just symbolically.
But it seems so easy to where I could say, yeah, I got this rock here from the moon. And it's really just from Montana,
Right? I mean, maybe we should all just start doing that, just picking up the most gray rock we can find and just tell people they're from the moon, because that will save you thousands of dollars and a lot of legal trouble.
Yeah, rocks have always blown me away in the way that, it's like if a rock is in your yard, you throw it, you get rid of it. But yet if it was a lava rock, oh, my God, look what I've got. I've got real lava here now.
Yeah, I think kids go through phases, right? Some kids love animals, some kids love dinosaurs, and some kids love rocks. And that actually is sort of what is the inciting incident in this episode, because it was kids from around the world who were able to come to the United States to be gifted a piece of the moon. And then it's those moon rocks that then began being traded on the underground market.
Do you ever feel like that you're going to uncover something that someone's going to come knocking on your door going, hey, Dana, you weren't supposed to know this one. You kind of crossed that line this time.
I did feel that way when I figured out that NASA has secret agents. When you were like, there are space agents. It was less that I was worried that the police were going to come to my door, and more that I was worried that like any minute there would be an NBC show called like Space Detectives.
Yeah. Well, see, I kind of got that vibe when they brought back that little piece of a meteor and they couldn't get it open. I'm going, baloney. What do you mean they can't get it open? There's something really going on here that's top secret.
Yeah, they know what's happening, right?
See this? You see how these little things that you create on this podcast creates conversation? We all bring in our own little conspiracy theories now.
I mean, I believe that conspiracy theory. Once you listen to this podcast and realize how deep the moon rock trade goes, you'll believe anything.
So do you feel like a kid when you're doing these podcasts, and you feel like that you're right there in the third grade and your teacher says, okay, here's your writing project. Go get me some information?
I kind of think it's better than school. I mean, one of the reasons that when I started Noble Blood, my goal was to make a podcast about history for people who don't think they like history. Because I think the way that things are taught in school is, all names and dates. And the thing about Noble Blood, the podcast that I originally started, was that I wanted to tell stories.
Right.
I didn't want people to know the year the French Revolution happened. I wanted people to know, what it was like for Marie Antoinette when she was in prison, and then what her last words were as she was being led to the guillotine. Those are stories that I think people will remember. And so one thing that I love about this new podcast, very special episodes, is that I think it's just a reminder for adults to be curious. I mean, kids are naturally curious, and I think that life kind of grinds it out of them. But every episode of this podcast will send you down a rabbit hole, will teach you something that you never knew before, and will make you look at the world in a slightly different way.
You bring up a very interesting point about curiosity. Sometimes I think the way adults complain about how life is moving so fast is because we've lost the journey of being curious. And you need podcasts such as this to slow the hell down.
I think so, too. I think it's really important. Like, I am totally someone who needs quiet time. And I think if you're, meditating and being Zen, that's great. But so often I find myself like watching TV also on my computer, also on my phone, 3 screens going at once. And there's something weirdly calming about putting in my headphones, listening to a podcast, and going for a walk and just concentrating on one thing.
When you're watching television and all of these TV shows are now featuring podcasters, do you ever just sit there and shake your head from side to side saying, it doesn't work that way? God, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Mostly it's that there's a lot more money involved for whatever they're doing. They're like going on these elaborate research trips, and I'm like, that must be nice.
So one of your stories, a 90s Hollywood mystery involving Canadian cops? Really? The Canadian Mounties, huh?
Oh, well, it's the Mounties that came to deal with this PCP incident.
Oh, for Nova Scotia, what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. You can imagine James Cameron, the cast and crew of Titanic, and a group of Canadian Mounties walk into a bar.
Oh, my God. And here comes Dudley Do-Right. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Do you ever laugh at some of this stuff that you're digging up?
Oh, my God, all the time. Some of it is so funny. Like, one thing that I find absolutely insane, did you know that no one actually knows for sure who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance?
What? Wow.
It was actually the Pledge of Allegiance, the thing that kids, across the country say with their hand on their heart every day, was actually came about because a struggling magazine had a plan to sell flags to schools. And it was a struggling middle-aged writer who claims that he came up with the Pledge of Allegiance. But the real story, leave it a little more complicated.
How did you find information like that? You had to do. It's more than just going to Google.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading and researching. And I'm lucky enough with iHeartRadio that we have an incredible team of researchers and fact checkers to make sure that what we're talking about is 100% accurate, even when you won't believe it.
Man, I'm jealous of you having that team of researchers, because when I have to do my show prep and stuff, for the next week, I begin on a Wednesday night. So I'm 7 days in advance for everything. And it's just so, man.
My God.
Oh, because I have to be prepped, man.
Yeah, what is your prep like?
My prep, I literally have got to be in a place with maybe some REM playing in the background, or maybe even I'll jump up there and play some ABBA as well. But I have to go into that zone, and I'll stay there. And it's just research, just dig. Okay, this sounds like a cool story, but I think I can go deeper. I've got to find it somewhere else. This is just part of the story. And because you realize that when you're looking up things in magazines, or if you're on the web, they only put what what's going to keep the reader there for a second, and I want something that's going to keep them there for minutes, maybe even hours.
You're speaking my language. That's exactly what I do, and the things that I love.
So, do you sit? Do you get to physically be a part of that prep with a writing instrument and a tablet? Usually, I've got words all around me right now because the thing is to be prepared, have a net, be ready to start, having a conversation.
When it comes to my research, I feel like so much of it is digital. I have 1,000 tabs open on my computer. Like, my computer is like wheezing like an old man. I'm really putting it through its paces. But I, especially with Noble Blood, because most of that is, history that's hundreds of years old. One of my favorite research tools is just going to archived books. The internet has incredible access and resources when it comes to like books from the 1800s that have been scanned onto Google. And so if I'm telling a story, about the 17 or 1800s, a thing that I love to do is go directly to newspapers and books from that era to read about how people were talking about it at the time.
Oh, my God. Just digging in. That's the kind of stuff that inspires me. Speaking of noble stories, was the most recent thing with Kate going to be a noble story? Because, that's a mystery. Nobody really knows what's been going on.
It really is a mystery. Although I will say with Noble Blood, I do tend to gravitate towards stories that are a little older so that I can add a little historical perspective. But in a few years, once we kind of know what's happening and once we kind of get the full story and the context around it, if I'm still making a podcast, that is absolutely something I'll talk about because, it's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, because, I don't want to second guess anything. I also want to give them their total privacy, but it's still one of those mysterious things.
definitely mysterious. And you're right. She's a even though she's a public person, she is still an individual. And that's sort of the interesting dichotomy that I run into a lot with Noble Blood, with historical royals. I think one of the reasons they fascinate me so much is because when you get a title, you have a lot of privilege, but you lose a lot of the rights of being a private individual.
How are you keeping your different podcast personalities in their own corners? Do you have to a certain, like a Monday is a Royal Nobles, is a Tuesday then is going to be the very special episodes? Because when you're running many different podcasts, you got to flip personalities.
I absolutely do. I think it's mostly that I just go into I record my podcast in a little closet in the back of my office.
Nice.
And I think whatever day I have to whatever podcast I'm working on that day, I just try to shut out the rest of the world, open that script, close the curtain, and get in the zone. No distractions, phone in the other room, internet off, and just try to be in the moment.
All right. Now, because I produce as well, so I've got to ask you the question: when do you go all the way, or because we don't speak a smooth way the entire time? Do you just go pick up and then you write down the number that where the person on the other side is going to do the edit, or how do you do this?
Oh yeah, I mess up constantly.
Me too.
I try to do it as smoothly as I can, but no, I'm always messing up. Or my cat is scratching at my door and coming in. My poor editors. I mean, it's the amazing team at iHeart. But I think they've gotten used to me because I've been doing Noble Blood now for coming up on 4 years. And so I think they've gotten very used to the rhythm of my mistakes.
Now, how many episodes are you going to be doing with very special episodes? I mean, is this going to be an ongoing thing, or is this just seasonal?
Very special episodes is just 12, if you could believe it, very special episodes.
Yeah.
Each individual stories, spanning the 1800s to Soviet Russia to present day, but just 12 episodes for now. But we might do more down the line. What's great about this podcast is the only thing that qualifies something to be a very special episode is if it makes us sit up and take notice.
Yeah.
So there's no shortage of future episodes.
One of the episodes is going to be about Spider-Man on Broadway. I heard nothing but bad things about that, or I read things about that, but you guys give it a big kind of a spin.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of respect for anyone, and please forgive the pun, who wants to take a big swing, as it were. I think what was kind of great about the Spider-Man musical is that they had these massive ambitions. And even though those ambitions arguably could not be realized, and as we get into in the episode, it went millions of dollars over budget and led to some pretty severe injuries among the cast, there's something very inspiring about people who aim that high with their artistic visions.
See, I always thought that it was like Phantom of the Opera, that something was going on inside that theater, and it was not supposed to be happening. And so, once again, that's a conspiracy theory, but it just wasn't supposed to happen.
I mean, that is absolutely true. As we get into in the podcast, the real story behind that show is sort of feuding producers, people edging each other out for creative control, and ultimately these stunts that were happening that should not have been happening.
Do you, when you sit down with Zaron and Jason, you're so one-on-one? I mean, you guys are Zooming together. I mean, you're not in the same studio, are you?
We are not in the same studio. We're Zooming together as we're talking about these episodes, and it's so fun to at least see each other's faces as we talk. But next week, we are going to be recording live together in person in Las Vegas, which will be really fun. That's
going to be a different kind of an experience. You're going to have to take your writing instrument with you and do some notes or something, because when you're face to face, that's even like Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and those guys. When they get together in the same place, it's a different kind of a listen.
It's going to be a different listen. So stay tuned on these podcasts. I hope listeners join us for the ride. And I wonder if you'll hear the difference of when we're recording in person.
I will. Only because I live this lifestyle.
Yeah.
Where can they go to find out more information about you? Because you're not just a podcaster.
No, I do have these podcasts, but I've also written books. My latest books are Anatomy, a love story, and its sequel, Immortality, a love story. And those are stories, I mean, talk about research rabbit holes. They're fictional novels, but they're set in the world of the early 1800s and the surgical world in Edinburgh when surgery was just beginning. So if that interests you, check out those books and listen to the podcast Noble Blood if you want to hear more of my voice, and listen to our brand new podcast, very special episodes.
Well, you got to come back to the show again, Dana. You know the door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so great.
You be brilliant today, okay?
Absolutely. You too.